This time, the topic is political conditioning of churches, political determinants of churches. I'd like to welcome the host of the panel, Father Professor Sławomir Pawłowski. Father Professor is the head of the ecumenical section in the Theological Sciences Institute at Theological Faculty at Catholic University of Lublin, and he will be the one to introduce the panelists. Our panel involves Father Dr. Professor Marek Blaza, Father Dr. Justin Boyko, Professor Christian Sonia, Father Professor Siegfried Gläser. I will introduce them in more detail right before their statements, but I wanted to introduce the topic first. This session is entitled Political Determinants of the Functioning of Churches, and I wanted to focus on each of those words separately. To begin with, political. This is a Greek word that comes from polis, a city-state. Politica are the issues or affairs of a city-state. There are different meanings assigned to the word policy, politics. According to Aristotle, it's the art of governing a state aimed at bringing about common good. And it seems like Catholic social science is heading that direction. It is supposed to be the art of governing the state for the common good. The second word, conditions, which is part of the title of this panel. According to the Polish language dictionary, conditioning or conditions are circumstances affecting a particular being or unit. But to condition means to make dependent or to become dependent on particular conditions. So conditions are an influence and also being dependent. And the final word, church. What do we mean by church? In Catholic Church, clergy are a third of a promile of all worshippers, all believers, and lay people, worshippers, which are the vast majority of the Church. Their involvement in social, political, and economic affairs, so that they are permeated by the demands of the gospel, is necessary. These are the demands imposed by the Church on them. How do two realities, politics and church, come into play and are interwoven? 2 weeks ago, on Sunday's Gospel, we listened to the words of Jesus: give to Caesar which belongs to Caesar, and give to the gods that which belongs to God. The Christ makes a distinction. But does he divide? Does he make a division? Pope Francis, in the Lord's Angel prayer, commented on it, saying that these words of Christ are often misconstrued. It seems like Christ wanted to separate that which is temporal from that which is spiritual, whereas the worshippers are supposed to care for the earth's values that were given to them. And on a final note, the Pope Francis adds that human belongs to God, the entirety of human beings. Every human being individually belong to God. The world, the human being, and Caesar also belong to God. Can we remember that we belong to the Lord, or are we allowing the logic of the world shape us and make our work, politics, and money our idols that we need to worship? On a final note, let me remind you the well-known words issued here in Poland 70 years ago, on the 4th of July 1953, to be exact. And here they are. We're teaching that we need to give to Caesar that which is his, and to God that which is God's, But when Caesar sits on the altar, we clearly say, this cannot be done. These were the words of the Millennium Primate, Stefan Wyszyński, in his sermon during Corpus Christi in Warsaw, 4th of July 1943. 53. And this was coupled with a letter that accompanied the sermon that said the human things must not be laid on the altar of God. Faith and theology closer to us, and we're dealing with political determinants or conditions of churches that are close to us. The first speaker, Father Dr. Marek Blaza, a professor, a Jesuit, professor of the Catholic Academy in Warsaw. His area of expertise is sacraments and liturgy of Eastern churches. He himself is a three-ritualist. It's to do with Roman Catholic and Byzantine and Ukrainian and Romanian Byzantine traditions of liturgy, and his book from 2018, Church in the State of Epiclesis, was considered by the Committee of Theological Sciences of the Polish Academy of Sciences to be the best theological publication of 2018. Father, please give your statement on the topic of Ukrainian Eastern Orthodox Church as a subject of, like a bone of contention between Constantinople and Moscow. Dear all, thank you for the invitation. I'm always happy to come back to my alma mater, my university, where I did my PhD, as well as Father Orszaban. We worked under the late Father Professor Kryniewicz, and all the more I'm more obliged to give my thanks. And in the next 15 minutes, I'll try to briefly present that which is most important. I'm sorry to those who deal with this matter on a regular basis. I will be using simplification. It's difficult to cram a lot of content in 15 minutes time slot. So, Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine being divided as a bone of contention between Constantinople and Moscow. Well, a bone of contention, a subject of dispute. Looking at the history of Ukrainian church, the church in Ukraine has been treated as an object, especially by Constantinople and Moscow together. And what we can observe now, we can see auto-cephalization of Eastern Orthodox Church, and also subjectivization of the Church. It ceased to be an object and became an agent, a subject. Let's begin with history. And without history, we won't be able to understand what's transpiring now. A few key historic moments also related to the history of Poland, not just the history of Ukraine. Firstly, the baptism of Kiev, Russia. Vladimir was baptized, and Byzantine church structures in Russia, Kiev, Russia, came to be. At that point, church was not divided yet. Kiev metropolitan center was created. It was dependent on Constantinople Patriarchy for a long time. It was dependent on Constantinople for so long, and until I say so, which will be a significant part of history. The metropolitan capital in Kiev wasn't too attractive. A lot of the metropolitans were actually Greeks who did not dream big dreams. They did not want to occupy Kiev or be operating in Kiev. In Russia, Kiev, Russia, Greek was not a language that was widely spoken. A metropolitan in Kiev from Greece didn't have it easy. There were single metropolitans coming from Russia ethnically, but the church developed until the time of Mongolian invasions. I specifically referring to 14th century and 13th century. And then Kiev metropolitan bishop escaped, was forced to flee from Kiev. Kiev was famously destroyed and degraded. It no longer was an important city in Kiev, Russia. And after many trials and tribulations, this Kiev metropolitan bishop traveled through Yaroslavl, a city close to Moscow, not the one in Poland. He then ended up in Moscow. He took residence there, and at this point, the double power came to be. There was Kiev Metropolitan in Kiev and Kiev Metropolitan in Moscow, two Kiev Metropolitans at the same time. Then, situation became even more complicated. Florence Union, a church council that signed the Florence Union, hosted the highest member of Russian Church, Isidore, Metropolitan Bishop Isidore, who was also Greek. In 1939, he signed this union that we mentioned, Florentine Union. Because of this, Moscow, by not accepting this union, was effectively saying that since the Patriarch of Constantinople, together with the Kiev Metropolitan, effectively detached from the church, and Moscow became a stand of true Christian belief. They decided to choose their own metropolitan bishop, which meant that they made themselves autocephalic and justified the fact by saying that everybody accepted the union, we couldn't, so we were on our own. Of course, then Constantinople was apologized for this decision. It didn't change much. Later, from 1450, the church in Russia was divided between two metropolitan centers, Constantinople and Moscow, autocephalic center. But this self-appointed metropolitan bishop, Nadal Jonasz, was boasting the title of Kiev metropolitan at the same time, and not just Moscow metropolitan bishop. Another important event was raising the position of Moscow Patriarchate in 1559, of Metropolitan Bishop in Moscow. And the circumstances for that were not clear, because Constantinople Patriarch who came to Moscow was kept there as a prisoner. He was enticed to let the Moscow Patriarchy exist. At one point, he even offered to become Moscow Patriarchate, but he was told that it was cold and he was better off coming back where he came from. That way, Moscow Patriarchate came to be, even though the other patriarchs of other centers allowed this church to exist. What matters here as well is that this patriarchate in Moscow existed, but Kiev Metropolitan Center belonged to Constantinople still. In 1686, this was the moment where MPs of Tsar Russia came to Adrianople and treated with great vezor and talked about the Kiev Metropolitan Center to be given to Moscow in unclear circumstances. Some say there were bribes involved. This Metropolitan Center was given to Moscow Patriarchate. this also is connected with the history of the Commonwealth of Poland. The Treaty of 1680s, the first Commonwealth of Poland, had the pre-partitions borders. That way, Moscow was able to say, can you see, there are Eastern Orthodox believers who belong to Moscow. We need to defend them. We need to take care of them. And we all know what it led to in the end. The consequence was the first partition of the Commonwealth of Poland. And now, the so-called granting of Kiev Metropolitan Center was understood in different terms by Constantinople and Moscow. Constantinople understood it as temporary arrangements. They thought the Moscow Patriarch was a temporary leader or supervisor over Kiev Metropolitan Center, whereas Moscow thought that it was indefinite. This was forever, which is what led to the new developments in 2019 and 2018, when the dissident Eastern Orthodox churches, including Ukrainian Orthodox Church under Kiev and Ukrainian Autocephalic Eastern Orthodox Church, these were attempts to become independent, but these churches were not part of canon. They were not accepted by other churches. Constantinople took two of these structures and made it into a legal entity. And after Epiphanius, Metropolitan Bishop, was elected, they granted autocephaly to this very structure of Eastern Orthodox Church of Ukraine. And now, because I'm pressed for time, very briefly, I will say this. Ukrainian Kiev Eastern Orthodox Church came to be after the fall of communism. Metropolitan leader, the legal Metropolitan of Kiev, counted that after the death of Moscow Patriarchate, he would be the leader. It didn't happen, because of which some say he wanted to stay the Kiev Patriarch. He called a church council in Ukraine that was to announce autocephaly. Some listened to him, some wanted it, but the majority of bishops were against it. And this is how the non-canon church was created. Of course, the leader was then demoted and removed from office. At the same time, there was autocephalic church, Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine, that had its roots in the German occupation of Ukraine at the time of the general government, and where there were attempts to create an independent Ukrainian Catholic Church, but German occupants did not allow this church in the general government to be described with the adjective Ukrainian. Later on, individuals affiliated with the church migrated to the States, to Canada, and came back after the fall of communism. And this is how two non-canon structures, church structures in Ukraine, were created. So what we had was the Church, Eastern Orthodox Church, under Moscow's jurisdiction, and the Eastern Orthodox Ukrainian Church that was autocephalic due to Constantinople. Constantinople thought they had the right to make them independent, and they were trying to unite the churches. What are the possible courses of action now? Number one, the Eastern Orthodox Church of Ukraine is considered to be the only legal Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine. This solution would be perfect, but for now is not viable. Russian Eastern Orthodox Church will not agree to it, but also part of autocephalic Eastern Orthodox churches which are allies or affiliated with Moscow's church. The enemies of the church are treated as a schisma without the required ordinance. The Moscow Patriarch's churches are inviting the others to come and join them. They had been told for years that they didn't have, well, they were not qualified to become part of the church. Now they are inviting them to Moscow. That's one. Two, the simplest solution, and is going to sound utopian, would be the autocephaly for Ukrainian Eastern Orthodox Church. But we know that Moscow will not do it, will not forfeit this right, because the cradle of Christianity for Russia is Kiev, and secondly, proportionally bigger part of worshippers and clergy are in Ukraine, more so than in Russian Federation. So if Ukrainian Eastern Orthodox Church was independent, this would be the biggest Eastern Orthodox Church in the world. The second one would be the Romanian Eastern Orthodox Church, and the third one would be the Moscow Patriarchate. Third solution to the problem: Ukrainian Eastern Orthodox Church, the one under Moscow's jurisdiction, appeals to Constantinople Patriarchate to end this schism and open one single autocephalic church in Ukraine. And you would expect here that Constantinople would encourage the worshippers and clergy of Eastern Orthodox Church of Ukraine to join Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which, as I said, would be unrealistic, because those who believe to be canon would not join the church that isn't considered as such, without any atonement, without any conversion, just like that, overnight. They wouldn't join an illegitimate church. Fourth solution: Ukrainian Eastern Orthodox Church would consider itself or proclaim itself autocephalic, but this would be, well, scoring an own goal, because no legitimate Eastern Orthodox Church would accept it. It would be a dissident, effectively, and, well, isolated. And the final solution to the problem, related to the activities of Ukrainian decision makers towards Eastern Orthodox Church, would be delegalizing Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine. In October of this year, the Supreme Council in Ukraine, in its meeting, voted on the first reading of this bill that delegalizes Ukrainian Eastern Orthodox Church under Moscow's jurisdiction. But some say that this goes against Ukrainian constitution, article number 35, granting the freedom of religion. Also, there is a statement that one of the arguments for delegalization is that the center of given church is outside of Ukraine. If this is the case, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and Roman Catholic Church also have their centers outside of Ukraine and could be made illegitimate by the same logic. As we can see, as of now, we've come to a standstill, and it's difficult to resolve this issue. And I was talking only about Eastern Orthodox Church. I didn't even talk about Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, because there is no time for that. The situation is complex, and it goes to show that Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine is a bone of contention and an object of dispute between Constantinople and Moscow. The dispute between Greek Catholics and Eastern Orthodox believers has been going on for long, and this fight over Ukraine only confirms it. Confirms that there are two fractions of Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine, which is a threat and could lead to further rift between the two. So it shouldn't be neglected. And with that, I leave you all. It's been a lecture that is unfinished because you cannot finish it. It's a complex subject. War is still going on, and until the war ends, we'll not be able to say anything for certain. Thank you for your attention.
Another speaker will be Father Dr. Justin Boyko, who is a Ukrainian Studite monk. Studites is the order with the beginning going back to Saint Theodore of Constantinople from the turn of 8th and 9th century. He's a theologian from the Papal University in Rome. He's vicary in the Lviv metropolis, author of many publications, and his research interests include the legacy of Szeptycki and the Blessed Szeptycki. He will be talking about the church in Ukraine in the face of the war with Russia, challenges and opportunities. The floor is yours. Dear Father Dean, President, Chair of the session, all dear guests. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizers for inviting me to the Congress. It let me be back again to my alma mater. I graduated from this university in 1994. I was studying at the Faculty of Theology. Memories come back when Ukrainian students were devoted to the service of Catholic Church, not only in the area of pastoral care, but also academic theology. It is exactly theology when, after the years of being banned in the Soviet Union, opened before us the door to knowing, to learning the world of faith. It's exactly in theology that young students saw a great tool for transformation in Ukraine in the area of bringing back the Christian roots to the country. So it was our special mission, which the former rector, Bishop Chisło, called being the madman of Christ. Now I'm returning to this eminent university in very different context. Today, my alma mater, in the context of war, is very different. I have different hopes and wishes for today with the bag of experiences related to the current war. We Ukrainians, Greek Catholics, following the words of our bishop Slatosław, we are the nation that courageously fight for our freedom because we know that the truth is with us. And Christ says, you will know the truth and it will set you free. Trying to compare the current situation in Ukraine with biblical motives, I can think of Mary staying under the cross. Although the evangelists don't say about it, we may actually understand their sentiments and feelings. She could not do anything standing under the cross. She was abandoned by all, but at the same time, she could cherish the hope that a circle of close friends stayed with her. So that's why we also think that the church persists. The challenges that are waiting us may be changed, but I would like to focus on those challenges and opportunities that are particularly important. The ecclesial challenges and opportunities. If any one of you started a conversation in the streets of Ukraine, you would hear a question. What church do you refer to? Because as we have heard, Ukraine is a country with many denominations. There are many different Catholic churches, but also Orthodox churches. There is Greek Catholic Church. According to sociological studies published by Rezunkova agency, the study from 2023, more than 74% of Ukrainians declared they are believers. 12.2% said they are undecided. The atheists account for 2.5%, and about 4% said they are indifferent if it comes to the question of religion. And 2% say it's difficult for them to answer the question about their religious affiliation. The number of believers among young people, that is people in the age between 18 and 24, has increased considerably. When in 2021 they accounted for 48%, at the end of 2022, 61% of young people called themselves believers. The bishop, Chisło, that I've already mentioned, very often repeated that the priests will always have work. And I found these words to be prophetic. But Christ himself referred to that, saying that there's lots of work during the harvest time, but too few workers. On the one hand, the demographic situation paints a silent picture, especially given the war situation, but actually the same situation can be observed in the rest of Europe. Probably you can see that the young people in Ukraine at war, the number of believers increased, but not many choose the church-related vocation. Some people believe that celibacy might be the reason for the decreasing number of priests. But actually, in some churches, like in the Greek Catholic Church, it is possible to set up a family by a priest. The main problem actually today is the lack of faith in God. Very often I talk to young people about the role of faith in their life, and many say that the faith helps them not feel isolated. Many say that they look for God but are not interested in church as an institution. Trying to understand this viewpoint, I realized that faith help people not feel alone. But the problem is also that people don't understand the mission of the church and the very idea of the church. When we are talking about Ukraine, the Moscow or the Russian Christianity did great harm to the idea of church, because from that perspective, church is like a religious office, and the mission of church would be tantamount to the Christian jihad. I remember that one of Orthodox patriarchs said that communism itself is actually a good system. The only drawback to it is the abandonment of the idea of God. That is why another form of communism has been formed in the former Soviet countries, communism with God, supported by the idea of Ruski Rim, Ruski Mir. Many believe that many believe in the Orthodox Church that they actually are following the mission given by God. Why do I mention all that? Well, the model of church shaped by the Moscow Orthodoxy, the church is shaped by the Holy Russian State. According to them, this is a transcendental entity with a soteriological function. In order for you to be saved and rescued, you need to belong to the Russian state. All the Russians will enter paradise, while all the rest will go to hell. This has been explicitly said by the Russian Patriarchate. For almost 30 years of independence, the Ukrainian state authorities treated the Ukrainian church belonging to the Russian Patriarchate as the national church. As Professor Blaza mentioned earlier, a first bill has been adopted in the Ukraine on the functioning of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. What is important to separate the church, the mission of the church from its affiliation. What should we do if the structure calling itself a structure is not performing its actual mission? This issue requires lots of effort and a discussion. The church must be purged to some extent, but within this context, it seems that many people will leave the church, but the situation looks different thanks to the presence of the Catholic Church and Greek Catholic Church and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. The last one is a new formation, actually. We hope that it will follow a good path in the future. If it comes to the Catholic churches and their challenges during the time of war, what is paradoxical was the stance of the Holy See and the position of pacifism. I think that the Ukrainians and the representative of the Holy See in Ukraine the Apostolic Nuncio could properly interpret that situation. In order to provide help to the citizens and especially to the emigrants, it required lots of effort on the part of the clergy and all the denominations. We have to remember that man is the first and fundamental path of the church. The basis of all is the good and well-being of man. The anthropological theology is based on the idea that man is created in the image of God. If man left God, he another important issue is the fact that we've got two levels of the church, that is the vertical and horizontal. During the war, we may be tempted to think that the church might be performing its social functions without talking about God. But when we see that people are being killed, we should point to certain examples, like, for instance, the example of Mary standing under the cross. If it comes to those challenges and opportunities, we may point to what Bishop Slatoslav said. Today, the Christian world is confronted with the challenge. If the Christian church follows the ideology of Russian Mir, it actually undermines the spiritual nature of that theology. Talking with the leaders of many different religious denominations, I was thinking about how Christian ideology is used to justify the crimes of the regime, of the Russian regime. That's why I'm repeating always, if you don't have what is important is that we may follow the example of Ukrainians and transplant it in the other areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Doctor. So when we begin the discussion, I will remind you or summarize the speeches of all of our panelists very briefly. So the next guest is Father Professor Christine Sonia from Romania, a professor, Vice Dean of the Theology, Eastern Orthodox Theology faculty in Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca, Romania. Cluj-Napoca, the city, is in the very heart of Romania, very center. The size of that city is similar to Lublin's, and after Bucharest is the second biggest university city in Romania. The university was in 1959 was a result of a fusion of Babes University with Bolyaiv University. Father Professor is an author of numerous publications, including Theological Dialogue of Inter-Christianity, World After Babel, being an apostle, and Responsibility, Theological Vision of Secular Missions. He's been a parish priest in Cluj-Napoca, St. Andrew's Parish. He's also a editorial team member of Eastern Orthodox journal devoted to intercultural theology, dialogue, and mission. Salt is the name of the journal. Like the salt of the earth. Makes you think of that. One sentence of introduction, to quote one statement of Father. The ecumenical mission would underline the spiritual dimension of mission. Theosis, relationship with Christian witness, could play an important role. To quote Father Professor. We will hear a lecture entitled The Approach of Romanian Eastern Orthodox Church to Public Theology, in English, Public Theology. A response to contemporary challenges. Please take the floor.
Thank you for the introduction. Dear Father Dean, dear colleagues, dear guests, students, and friends, I will dare to say. So some comments on my introduction. I thank you very much for that. I had to be humbled after that presentation, but first of all, this is our proud, the fact that the university from Cluj is the first one in Romania in both terms of numbers and quality. This is not our, but compared with the Bucharest. And then the second, I am not anymore the vice dean of the faculty. I was vice dean for the 2 mandates. My colleague Adrian Podaru is now the vice dean of the faculty, and he is here representing the leadership of the faculty. So, but thank you very much for mentioning that. So, my presentation, it's a little bit longer. I prepared for 25 minutes, but I will try to cut it in for 15 minutes. And yes, as was mentioned, it's about the approach of the Orthodox Church to public theology. Is a topic that we try to develop a little bit in our faculty. I'll try to speak slower for the translator. Sorry, I forgot about that. And I have an introduction about what is the understanding of public theology in the Orthodox context. And I said there that this approach, this response to the Ukrainian issue can be tackled as a public theology subject. And therefore, I will present here as a case study only the positions of the Romanian Orthodox Church concerning the Ukrainian issue. And I found out that there are 6 official decisions on the Ukrainian issue. I can say issues because they're not just one. 3 of them were published and issued before the war, and the last 3 after the war. Therefore, I will present both these sets of decisions in their context, and probably for this presentation would be enough, because my second part of the paper is the reception of these decisions of the Romanian Orthodox Patriarchate in the public sphere in Romanian society. So, the first decision was issued in May 2018. And as Professor Marek mentioned, it's the history of this conflict between Ukraine and Russia is very deep-rooted in the conflict difficulties of the Orthodox Church within Ukraine. And our Patriarchate said that at the Romanian Patriarchate, several meetings were held with representatives of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Moscow Patriarchate in that time, with representatives of Ukrainian embassy in Bucharest, as well with the delegates of the Moscow Patriarchate on the latest developments in the church in this country, I mean in Ukraine. According to the view of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, which is dependent on Moscow Patriarchate, the Ecumenical Patriarchate intends to grant autocephaly only to, they were called schismatic autonomous groups not recognized by other local autocephalous Orthodox churches, namely the Ukrainian Autocephalous Church and the Kiev Patriarchate, as you mentioned earlier, and not through consultation and consensus with the Moscow Patriarchate. Second point, the position of the Ukrainian state authorities is that the autocephaly is necessary. However, this autocephaly must be granted to all Orthodox structures in Ukraine to form one autocephalous Orthodox Church. In that time, there were, let's say, at least 3 different parallel structures. That was, in that moment, called schismatic, that was attached to Moscow Patriarchate under the homophorus, we call it, of Metropolitan Onufri, and this one with its leadership outside and then inside of Ukraine. And the state of Ukraine wanted to have all these structures together in one autocephalous Orthodox Church in that moment. The position of the views of the Moscow Patriarchate are summarized following the visit of His Eminence Metropolitan Hilarion Alfeyev, in that time the representative for the foreign affairs of the Moscow Patriarchate. In these lines, 1. If the actions of the Ecumenical Patriarchate continue in the direction of granting autocephaly to the 2 schismatic structures in Ukraine, a dangerous path will be opened. B, or 2, granting autocephaly to a part of Ukrainian church, which does not include most Ukrainian Orthodox believers, will lead to a further division of the Ukrainian Orthodox and open, and with quotation mark, Pandora's box, as there are schismatic groups in all Orthodox churches. The issue of autocephaly and how it is granted was discussed and approved in the pre-conciliar process, except for the manner of signing the Tomos of autocephaly. So there was the positions on one side, the Ukrainian church that wanted to be independent, the Ukrainian church under the Moscow Patriarchate, and the officials of the Ukrainian state. Hearing them, the Romanian Patriarchate stated, since both Ecumenical Patriarchate and Moscow Patriarchate have exercised canonically authority over Ukraine at different times in the past, it is necessary that the issue of the autocephaly of the Orthodox Church in Ukraine be resolved by fraternal understanding between the 2 patriarchates. It was 2018. It was a hope in that moment. The autocephaly of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine should be granted to the 3 existing structures to form one autocephalous Church of Ukraine. Very logical, this proposal of the Romanian Patriarchate. The agreement between 2 patriarchates, Ecumenical Patriarchate and Moscow Patriarchate, will then be communicated to the other sister Orthodox churches with a view to recognition of autocephaly by each church. This is the procedure, canonical procedure in the Orthodox tradition, at least according to the pre-conciliar documents and even according to the conciliar documents from Crete 2016. I will not enter in detail. So this was the position of the Romanian Patriarchate in 2016. There's another position in 2018, sorry. Another declaration in 2018, after the meeting of Patriarch Bartholomew with the Patriarch Kirill in 31st of August 2018 in Istanbul, Turkey. And in that moment, after the meeting of the patriarchs, after 1 month, in fact, in the days after this meeting from Istanbul, the Ecumenical Patriarch said that he never ceased his canonical rights over Ukraine. And that was the moment when this conflict started to be more deep. Because of that, Romanian Church issued another declaration mentioning for the first time the idea of synodality, going together on this path of recognition. And also the patriarchate, Romanian patriarchate, urged the people to increase their prayer for unity. So in 2019, after the recognition of the Ukrainian patriarchate in Ukraine, attached or recognized by the Constantinople, another document was issued by the Romanian patriarchate. And in this moment, our church mentioned again the synodality way to solve the issue and the conflict, and also somehow foreseeing the conflict in the future. There will be a long conflict, speaking for the first time about the possibility to organize within the Ukrainian territory a Romanian Orthodox vicariate for the Romanians believers that are living in Ukraine. That was the first time when they mentioned this solution for the Romanians that were, in that moment, they belonged to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate, and they didn't want to be attached to Constantinople, let's say, body. But in order to be in communion with other churches, our church proposed for them a different type of organization. In the first moment, they say they can be under the jurisdiction of the Autocephalous Church of Ukraine, or after the, let's say, the decision of the maybe Moscow Patriarchate, after negotiation, they can be under that jurisdiction that will be recognized by all the Orthodox churches. And it was also a meeting. In fact, it was an interview with the Metropolitan of Ukrainian Church about this issue, Epiphania, because we have the same structure in Romania for the Ukrainian believers. We have the same, like in a mirror, the same vicariate, we have it in Romania, and he agreed on this issue. But because of the war, that situation changed in 2020. So there were different receptions of this decision within the Romanian society, different opinions and even conflictual opinions, but the issue was still open for a good result after the negotiations. Because of the war, situation was totally different. So there was another decision issued in 6 July 2022. Why? Because on 27th May 2022, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate, that under the Homophorus of Onufri, declared its independency from the Moscow Patriarchate. And among the members of the synod, 95% voted for independency. And because of that, and they say, now we are independent, we are self-governing, and we have the possibility to consecrate the Holy and Great Mirror in Kiev. This, for Orthodox, is a very important symbol and gesture. Only the autocephalous churches are able to consecrate the Holy Mirror. There was an idea that they are autocephalous and they are consecrating the Holy Mirror. There was a position. Now, what is the comment of the Roman Orthodox Church in the document? However, this is the official declaration of the Roman Orthodox Church. It should be noted that the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Moscow Patriarchate, has not explicitly declared its status as an autocephalous church, because to be independent, an independent church in the canonic law is almost nothing. You have to be autocephalous to be recognized by the church. Independence is a political term used by states, but not the churches in our context. And it was also mentioned in the Sundays, or some days after this declaration from 27th of May, the Metropolitan Onufri commemorate Kirill as his primate in the church. So it was probably a political gesture, but our church acknowledged that. And therefore, they decided to organize that vicariate for the Orthodox Romanians in Ukraine under the jurisdiction of Romanian Orthodox Church. And that was approved in 10 February 2023, this year. So, And the decision of the Romanian Patriarchate is that to open a discussion with the local authorities in Ukraine, not with the churches, because we don't know who is now entitled to give a decision or approval for that vicariate, but according to our information and with what the declaration said, there were some discussions, and the Bishop Veniamin of South Bessarabia was is entitled to negotiate this vicariate of the Romanians in Ukraine. Okay, I forgot to mention something, and I will stop here. We can discuss afterwards. First declaration after the war of the Romanian Orthodox Church is like this: the Romanian Patriarchate issued a statement expressing the position on the Russian-Ukrainian war. The three ideas can be discerned in this statement. They characterize the Russians as aggressors, war unleashed by Russia against a sovereign and independent state. Then they call to pray for peace and mercy for the refugees, and at least to our knowledge, the churches help a lot the refugees in that time, even now. And then they encourage not to respond with the same violence, in our territories. At least violence not with the guns, but imitated this violence in the verbal violence and attacks on the person or denigration. So this is, I don't have a conclusion for this issue. As you mentioned, it's an ongoing situation in our church, but as a short conclusion, I would say we now face kind of within the Orthodox bodies a semi-schism. We are somehow separated, and at least till now the Romanian Orthodox Church is in communion with all the autocephalous churches, but the Moscow Patriarchate cut the ties with the, of course, Constantinople, not of course, but it's logical, with the Church of Greece, with the Church of Cyprus, and with the Church of Alexandria, as far as I know. So out of 14 autocephalous churches, 5 are not in communion with each other. So, in terms of numbers of believers, I think it's half somehow. And we pray, and we ask you for prayer to restore the unity among our churches in the future, in the near future. Thank you. I hope I'm not...
Thank you. Thank you.
Bardzo.
Thank you very much for this presentation. And now I will give the floor to Reverend Professor Siegfried Gläser, the head of the Department of Ecumenical Theology at the University of Opole. He specializes in ecumenical theology. He authored many monographs, articles on that topic, among others, Eucharist and Dialogue, and the publications on Eucharist in Orthodox Church. He also authored a big volume on the ecumenism in papal teaching after Second Vatican Council. He is also co-head of a project that he will present in a moment. The title of his talk is In the Service of Reconciliation, Ecumenical Project, Reconciliation in Europe, the task for the churches in Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, and Germany. Dear Father Dean, dear Father Professor, dear Chair, dear guests, let me allow you to begin with a personal thread. First of all, as my first word, I would like to congratulate the Father Dean and all the other organizers for preparing this Congress of the Theologians of the Three Seas region, and especially a great title and the topic, the leitmotif, which is theology in dialogue with modernity. This shows a great scientific but also social level, because theology is in service of faith and social life. This leads me to the second personal thread. I would like to convey the appreciation from the University of Opole. It's a great honor for me to appear in front of you and to be part of that project, for which I'm very grateful. Churches in the face of war and politics. This is a very topical theme of this panel, of this session. So the very assumption is that we are talking about the churches, not just about the church in denominational terms. Because the problem we are referring to applies to all the churches, but also to all religious and ecclesiastical groups. As Professor Pawłowski said, it's actually an art to lead the state and the society for common welfare. The common welfare, the common good is the aim of theology also. Those aims is, for instance, the guarantee for the respect for the human person, respect for values professed, the sentiment to belong to a particular community, and also peace. Peace in international relations and in social relations, broadly understood. Politics is thus, from the very assumption, a service for the others. Ladies and gentlemen, in this pro-existential social assumption, we may find an outline, a very important outline of the church. The service of reconciliation in the wounded world. Which is advocated by Christ. Let us look at our past. World War II inflicted many wounds among nations, among states, and among particular people, because this experience is always an element of individual people's life. This civilizational catastrophe left many victims, but also changes, structural changes, included in the church. The greatest wound has been inflicted to human hearts, which can still be seen in many different communities worldwide. This war hecatomb had its consequences, social consequences, individual consequences for the inhabitants of the whole European continent, but also for all the citizens worldwide. After World War II, we deal with a great wave of revenge, which is probably the darkest part of post-war history of Europe. This is just looking into our yesterday. What about today? Here and now, when we think about the Russians' aggression on Ukraine, this is the subject of our today's reflections. This particular war is also connected with the death of many people. Similarly, as in the situation of World War II, the trauma of the Ukrainian people is actually detrimental to the people's life. But what about its aftermath? Similarly to the situation following World War II, Christians and the churches in the idea of reconciliation, they are responsible for this reconciliatory pastoral service and care. We are faced with new challenges. There's no doubt that Europe needs reconciliation. The world needs reconciliation. The process of reconciliation in Europe, especially in the area involving Poland, Ukraine, Germany, Belarus, ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you the project that has been referred to also in the title of my presentation. We have representatives of the leaders of the churches participating in this project. Apart from me, there's Father Shaban. I want to present this project to you because I want to show that reconciliation is not only a reality of a theoretical reality, but reconciliation is a specific life, a specific task that can be implemented by different churches in different modes, depending on how they can reach particular communities. If it comes to the assumptions of the project, although this is an ecumenical, ecclesiastical project, it goes beyond that space. It applies also to political and social areas. The idea for the project was born in 1995 as part of the works of the Commission on the works of the Ecumenical Council. The idea was presented in Graz in 1998, and it was commonly approved. What about the formula of the project? It is implemented based on the work of different representatives, official representatives of churches, Roman Catholic, Greek Catholic, Evangelical, from Poland, Belarus, Germany, and Ukraine. The work is being organized in a rotational manner. we address the issues that are important for particular countries, particular societies at a given time. The representatives of the churches of a particular country in which a conference or a meeting is to be held, they suggest a particular topic that should be addressed. This is always something that is particularly topical and important for a particular community. There are internal meetings of the Commission. The aim is always to reach people with this idea of reconciliation. We invite the speakers to the conferences, depending on the particular topic and the content of that meeting. There are also representatives of the episcopate, also apostolic nuncios, and representatives of particular churches, clergymen, laymen, representatives of state authorities, local, regional authorities, and all people of good faith that want to participate in the project. We also invite always media, so that we could we could gain access to broad circles of the society. We publish information in 3-4 languages. This is a volume that resulted from just one session of our meetings. We and the other at the time of migration crisis, the tasks for the church and the state. There are many volumes and studies published as results of our meetings or conferences. We always try to organize meetings with local bishops. All our activities are conducted upon the approval of the leaders of particular churches. The tasks and aims of the project are always construed in such a way so that the result of those meetings could lead to a dialogue between different parties. So we want to gather people at one common table. A few years ago, at a conference in Kharkiv, that was a conference organized by the Academy of Legal Sciences in Ukraine. We were thinking, how can we make different Orthodox churches participate in that meeting? At that time, it was almost impossible. We knew that they accepted the invitations, but we were not sure how to put them at the same, how to make them sit at the same table. That's why we resorted to a kind of ruse. So we used an oval table and invited particular leaders to the seats at the table, but they were offered certain seats. We were able to mix the seats, so to say, if some people were not willing to sit next to other particular leaders. But it turned out that somehow we were successful, and the people saw the people participating saw that they could share their experiences. They were able to talk also about difficult topics in ecclesiastical relations. So it is able to lead a dialogue respecting the dignity of the other party. We always strive to see the richness of historical reality, to share those experiences. We also try to implement certain projects in different countries through the activity of particular churches in those states. We like to think that churches are independent institutions that can also act in social and political spheres. Probably you may ask about the source of funding for the project. Today it is financed by EKD and Renovabis. What are the fruits and results of our project? We need to remember this is a process and we deal with difficult tasks. But we managed, to a great extent, to convince the leaders of the churches we managed to convince them they can trust us. A very good example of that is the special mission that we conducted in Ukraine at one time. Trying to bring together churches in Ukraine to enter the path of a dialogue. And this was a dialogue between the churches from Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, and Germany. We were listening to the problems of different people, and we tried to lead them to positive solutions to those problems. To a great extent, we were successful in that. Very often, at the very beginning of such reconciliation processes, we need to first learn other parties. We need to learn different ways of understanding certain things. Over time, this cooperation was quite successful. We can say that the model was effective. We concentrated on practical, theological, and social topics. And where it was impossible to address those questions, we could start with social problems. This was, for instance, the case in Belarus. What we wanted to convey was that we want to enter this path of dialogue. So the project is a kind of a bridge between the churches and between churches and societies, communities, and between the churches and political factions. What is important, an important side of the project is the education of young people. Visiting Lublin, I bring also a specific gift. in November in Falente, near Warsaw, there will be a meeting, a conference, an educational meeting for the youth. And I'm offering you 2 seats at that meeting. One for someone from Ukraine and one for someone from Poland. And we will finance the participation in those meetings. There's just one condition. It's important that the persons participating in those meetings should know English, because this will be our main language of that meeting. And this will finish my talk. Thank you.
I'll remind you all, Father Professor Marek Blaza talked about the history of Moscow and Kiev centers, and he pointed to, even if theoretical, but still possibilities to resolve the issue, the division of Eastern Orthodox Church as a subject of dispute between Constantinople and Moscow. Father Bishop Boyko compared the situation of the Church in Ukraine to the role of Holy Mary under the Church. He talked about the mission of Church, the situation of the youth vocation. Father Professor Christian Sonia focused on the attitude of the Romanian Orthodox Church towards the situation in Ukraine. Romanian Church didn't approve nor condemn the orthocephaly of Orthodox Church, and opts for synod way of solving the issue and uniting the schism. Father Professor Siegfried Gläser talked about a particular project of reconciliation of Church in Europe. And you may ask questions. Please keep them brief. And I would also like to ask the speakers to give very short answers. If there are no questions from the audience, please voice them right now.
I have a very brief question for Father Christian Sonia. In this topic of the Orthodoxy in the Russian-influenced countries, there is the special case of Republic of Moldavia, and the Romanian Orthodox Church has a close connection to that, to the Church, or to the Orthodoxy in the Republic of Moldavia, where there are 2 overlapping canonical jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of the Romanian Orthodox Patriarchate and the jurisdiction of the Russian Patriarchate. And my question would be, is there anything to, or the Orthodoxy in Moldavia has anything to say to the situation in Ukraine, or has anything to learn from that complicated situation? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I don't know. It's a very complicated question and very complicated issues. So first of all, we have Transnistria, which is the same situation like Ukraine, but is older than Ukraine war. Maybe for the non-Orthodox participants in this conference, it's good to know that we have an administration there that belongs to Romanian Patriarchate, and the other one that belongs to Moscow Patriarchate. But they are not schismatic, they are together, they are functioning together. At the local level, there are still, let's say, not conflicts, but some tensions. Tensions is, I would say, the proper word. But when they are abroad, the primates of the churches, they are able to celebrate the liturgy together. So they are recognizing each other as a true community. The case is different in Ukraine because the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Moscow Patriarchate, didn't recognize the others, and they even rebaptized them, and vice versa also. I don't know if it happens, but this is the situation. And probably for the future, I don't know how it will be. Let's say, as a solution, I don't know, could be if the Moscow Patriarchate would recognize the other body as an autocephalous body, they could exist as two different Orthodox bodies, recognizing each other in the same territory. This would be the lesson from Moldavia. Probably will be tensions on the grassroots level, but at least theologically speaking, they will be somehow together, and they will be able to celebrate the liturgy in ecumenical realms. It will not be a schism anymore, probably. But I don't know. It could be a lesson. A small country with a good lesson, with a great lesson for the greater churches.
Igor Szaban. Ja mam dwa pytania.
Igor Shaban, I have two questions. First, the question to Father Boyko and Professor Marek Blaza. There is an idea. It has been around for 5 years, coming from Russia, that receiving Tomos, the document that's granting autocephaly for the Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine, was provoked by Greek Catholics, in part, that this independence is the first step to union with Rome, with the Pope. Do you have any ideas on that? This is one question.
Because he knows Romanian situation also very well. Romanian Orthodox Church do not recognize Ukrainian Orthodox Church yet, maybe. Can you explain why? And what's the reason?
When Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine, that is in a union with Constantinople, received Tomos in social media, you were able to read that it was a different union, just an Orthodox union. This was the wording. And I remember that Archbishop and Bishop Zoria and other Ukrainian theologians, Eastern Orthodox theologians, accepted, well, we have to accept the reality. Those who were joyous about Thomas were Greek Catholics mostly, and to be honest, now knowing facts about Ukraine, that Eastern Orthodox churches are leaving the jurisdiction of Moscow's Patriarchy and are joining the Ukrainian Eastern Orthodox Church, the population who is there doesn't always belong to Eastern Orthodox Church, but there are some Greek Catholics there too. Why does it happen? Eastern Orthodox Church is now associated with the aggressor in the minds of regular Ukrainians, if I understood it well. It's not a union, a second union. I'm not sure. After my personal conflict, well, of academic nature, with one of Eastern Orthodox theologians from the Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine, we disagreed on how to theologically evaluate the Tomos. I stopped discussing this issue. I'd rather wait a few more years until I fully understand the workings of it. One thing pains me. There isn't a one Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine, and it affects the faith of the youth, because the Eastern Orthodox Church, both that of Moscow and Ukraine, are still, they still have a lot of worshippers because of the older generations. But if these theological discussions come to the top and are discussed wider, and if taking care of the faith of the youth is put on the back burner, we will have a lot of different denominations, different structures with no faithful, with no believers and worshippers. And it is a challenge the Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine is facing. There will be Catholics that will come take their place, Protestants that will take their place, and they will level accusations at us, saying that we're not dealing with the important issues. We have to keep working on it. The Eastern Orthodox Church in Ukraine, the one that received the Thomas, faces a great challenge too. In terms of narrative it's been using, it now has a patriotic, nationalistic ring to it. The freedom will end. What will happen then? It lacks gospel and theology. It doesn't just refer to Eastern Orthodox Church, it refers to all of churches. I understand the current situation, but the reality that I see, I'm also a pastoral priest. I can see that if we don't speak about God, if we focus on social matters, with time we will transform into a social body, and this is the reason, this is the way we will be perceived by state government. And in Christianity we have this attitude to church. The church is expected to do all kinds of work socially for communities, but number one mission of church is to pass on the faith, and the faith is what gives rise to other activities. I don't know if I was making sense. Let me start with a practical point. I'm an academic teacher. I also work as a priest, practicing priest in a Greek Catholic parish, and a third of our congregation are Eastern Orthodox believers, belonging both to this Moscow jurisdiction and other ones. And one woman said this, "Father, I like it here in the Orthodox Church. You sing like they do in my village. The sermon is in Ukrainian, and I don't really care about who's your supervisor. I've never seen the Pope, I've never seen the Patriarch, but I can see you, Father." This is what one believer told me. This approach is not an isolated case. These believers say, well, explicitly that I would never go to a Greek Catholic church to pray, but this woman doesn't want to go to Polish Eastern Orthodox autonomous church because they believe they belong to Moscow. Because it's in Russian, there is no sermon. In Ukrainian, they don't understand everything. At the other side of the coin, 1 year ago, I met in person with Epifanius, Metropolitan in Kraków, and I said to him, and he's also open to cooperating with Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and I said that there were Eastern Orthodox believers coming to our church. He wasn't happy, to say the least. He didn't like it at all. And he said right away, we need to create our own structures here in Poland. There are a few priests who work here locally. There is no formal structure. They even remembered Metropolitan Sava, but from the perspective of autonomous Eastern Orthodox Church in Poland, they were treated as those who profess schism. I wouldn't say, well, I would say that the new Greek Catholic Church in Ukraine and Eastern Orthodox churches, well, play in the same team, but I don't know what will happen after the war. And I agree with the previous speaker. I've seen how much this church is looking for gateways, opportunities for development, and they copy solutions they've seen elsewhere, and they say that if it worked for other denominations, it may work for them. Coming to the second question, to address the question of Romania, speaking as somebody from the outside, and Romanians, as I always say, have the privilege of not being Greeks nor Slavs, and they are the second biggest Orthodox Church in the world, and they can have this position of waiting. They are allowed to wait, and there is the attitude of vigilance, being vigilance and waiting for the next moves, and being prudent, being reasonable, not making decisions too hastily, leaving a room to maneuver. And this is my way of viewing it, my perspective on it. It may be useful to maybe some brothers and sisters from Romania. My perspective will, but this is also very original Eastern Orthodox Church. I would call it Latin Eastern Orthodox Church, a very particular Eastern Orthodox Church, Romanian one, that we can learn a lot from.
Issue, I said already. But I can say some official statements of the Romanian Orthodox Church. There are some uncanonical issues there, and they are very practical issues. We had bishops that were cast out from the Romanian Patriarchate, and they were attached afterwards to the non-canonical Orthodox administrations. After the recognition of this autocephaly, those that were disposed by the Romanian Patriarchy, now they are official part of the church. So this is a situation that has to be solved. And these are the technical, I would say, issues, but they are not solved yet, and probably others. No, I think it's...
The translators cannot hear. The translators cannot hear the microphone.
Zaraz skończymy.
So we'll finish shortly. 1965 was the exchange of the letters between German and Polish episcopates. We forgive and we ask for forgiveness in Poland. Polish communists use propaganda, and they said, well, we are supposed to say sorry. In the project, the father professor was part of. There is no room for the church in Russia, but there is a question: how to bring about reconciliation if one party is the aggressor. Please, the very final statement, the very final word of today's session. The example of the letter of Polish bishops to German bishops is, well, case in point, showing us the situation of reconciliation, the process of reconciliation. Let's remember, it is a process after all, a process that implies various relationships. Reconciliation makes sense and matters only when there is conflict or lack of understanding, or like is the case with Ukraine aggression. Reconciliation is the end product, but it is supposed to break barriers in its initial stage, to break the ice, which ultimately leads to just and fair evaluation of the situation. It is supposed to lead to penitence and forgiveness in the long run. These are all elements that reconciliation brings together. And the process of reconciliation is not just moving forward. It has various phases and offshoots. And in the given situation, as we see it now, it's a particular one. And an example to summarize my point: a few weeks before the war in Ukraine broke out, before Russian aggression, I was in Lviv at a conference devoted to the idea of just peace. We discussed on reconciliation, and the question arose: who are we supposed to reconcile with? With the aggressor who's killing our brothers, our kin, and depriving us of the roof over our heads. That's the point. We should always look for the people of goodwill, those who will help us break the ice of evil. The evil does not have infinite value. By breaking the ice in various ways, at one point the barriers will crumble. If there are people who are brave, the way Polish bishops were, they put themselves in danger. They were also endangered in their own society. But still, we forgive and we ask for forgiveness. And I think that if we realize that reconciliation is a process that is constantly ongoing and never ends, and we should continuously fight for reconciliation, then we will see its merit also when bombs are dropping on people's houses. So let it happen. Thank you, everyone.